and then you got to pull this nipple out through that grommet. It's hard to fit in otherwise, the whole thing assembled. So that's the way I end up doing it, and then I just pull that thing back out and try to get it through the grommet, and then be able to put the washer and the nut secured on here. So with that being done, go ahead and we'll assemble the fuel tank. We've already got our mounts in here. It goes with the nipple up. Just kind of carefully pull the sides apart since there's no mounting down there. Make sure you get the holes lined up in the tabs. Just like so. And that's how the tank, it's kind of a floating fuel tank in here. So the next step we're going to do is mount our auto rotation swash plate guide and gyro platform. You notice I've already got a gyro on here because it's a rebuild. A lot easier just to leave it on. And we're going to head and mount that right on the very top. So we're going to wedge that in there. And keep in mind on this side we're going to use a special M3. It's a, they call it it's a servo support boss. And the reason being is once we get our servos in there, you can add the servo support bars in there. And the other side of that uses an M3 by 12, not an M3 by 10, but we use M3 by 10 on the other holes. So that and an M3 by 12 on the other side. We're going to do that and we'll be right back. Okay, we've put our gyro platform on with our swash plate. Keep in mind we've used the servo support boss for that arm later on. M3 by 10s here, and the set screw and the support boss there. M3 by 10 washer set screws here, and M3 by 12 here. It's a longer screw for here because you've got the two platforms together there. The next thing we're going to do is for our seesaw arm, or our elevator arm shaft, is a little arm for our servo. And what you got here is an M2.6 by 20 Allen head bolt with a nut on it, and two set screws that are M3 by 6. And the way that, and then you're also going to attach your ball with the with a little M2 nut on here, and make sure you Loctite that. Anytime you have metal to metal, Loctite it. You don't want metal to plastic Loctite it, it'll wear the plastic out. But anything metal to metal, make sure that's secured on there tightly. Use blue Loctite most likely. You're going to slide that on there. It is grooved with the, you'll see that this isn't perfectly round. They're grooved on flat on both two ends. And set that in place with the ball in, like so, and you're going to tighten that down and tighten your screws in once it's firmly in place there. So I'm going to do that and we'll come back and go to the next step. Okay, just so you know, when I put this platform on, I had to loosen these this top bearing just to create a little gap in order to slide that down in, because you might even have to do the back support too to get that gyro platform in. But make sure you tighten everything back up, anything that you've loosened up, to get that in there in place. The other thing we need to do is put our set screws in there, and that was in step 5. Just get these started in here for when the tail boom goes in, just so you can know you need to tighten those down once the tail boom's in place. And one goes on each side. So get that going, and then we'll continue on to putting our struts on after that. So we'll be right back and go to the next step. One thing you'll want to take note of that I've noticed during my assembly here was that this had slipped down and the bearing was actually exposed maybe about a millimeter or two. You want to make sure that these bearings are flush from top and bottom so that there's not any exposed bearings that you can see from outside the frame. So I had to correct that, just loosen up these two bolts and get it wedged in place. The next thing I'm going to do is put my starter cone on here. You'll notice there's a little groove in here where the set screw, this is actually off another, is a replacement I got. It only had one set screw on it. This one has two to help secure it, even though there's only one groove. The second one, it tend to strip without a second set screw. So put that on there. Use a little blue or red Loctite on here. Blue probably preferably will hold, but some guys will use red. You'll have to heat it up to get it back off. But stick that on there and make sure the set screw sets right in the groove on that shaft. So we'll come back and do our landing skids in just a moment. Alright, here we have our starter cone on, Loctited. Of course, it'll secure between now and the time you start it if it's a new build. The next thing we're going to do is put our struts together, and what you end up doing is sliding your struts into place on the skids, starting from the back side and sliding them forward. What you're going to do is end up with about 30 millimeters of distance between here and the back. In your kit you'll have to put the little rubber mounts on here. Some guys will CA these on so they don't fall off. Get those slid in there, and once you have it lined up, then you can start mounting it onto your frame like so. You'll have to make some adjustments and then use your they call for the M3 lock nut. The washer will go underneath with a washer on the top. Here, you can't quite see that. And then these are M3 by 25 head bolts. Now the pros, and there's a pro tip that says you can tie wrap these up, or some guys will get plastic bolts to hold these in place. The reason being is if it comes down and you take a hard landing, you'll break your frame. So that's always a possibility. It's happened a couple times to me. But you put these bolts in, and then you'll take some set screws and you'll mount these right down in here to hold the skid to the strut. And those are M3 by 6 set screws. So I'm going to put this all together. You should have a bunch of washers and nuts and little lock nuts. So I'm going to do that and we'll come back. Alright, we've got our skid and struts on. Hopefully you've gotten that all secured. You're going to put the bolts in here and leave 30 millimeter gap right here between the end and the end of the rear strut, and then you're going to tighten your set screws into each corner of the strut into the skid. Our next step is going to be putting in our shaft. And that's going to slide right into here. The way we're going to do that is you're going to use the shaft and this little collar. And this collar is going to go right on the very top bearing up here once you have your shaft in place. You'll notice there's a groove in here where this collar sits and it's not centered, so make sure you put the shorter end from this groove up on the very top. So we're going to go ahead and put that in there, and you're going to use some blue Loctite inside these little set screws to hold it in place. just so it doesn't rotate. And this isn't, one side has a groove and one side's flat. Make sure that the groove side goes setting down towards that washer. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And when you get these inside this main shaft in, make sure you set this inside and set that right through the gearing sets. So we're going to go ahead and do that, get this all put together, and come back.